You walk into a world of luxury where sleek private jets line up, ready for takeoff. You own one of them. Yet, the moment you arrive, your own pilot looks at you with suspicion. "Excuse me, but which flight are you looking for?" His voice carries an unmistakable doubt. You stay calm and reply, "My flight." But instead of confirming, the pilot narrows his eyes, scanning you from head to toe before smirking. "Are you sure? Because the owners of this jet don't usually look like you." The air in the terminal suddenly shifts. A heavy silence settles over the space as airport staff glance at each other, uncertain. No one speaks up, but you can feel it, prejudice woven into every glance, every unspoken word. This isn't the first time you've faced this, so what do? Walk away? Let it slide? Or do you teach this man a lesson he'll never forget? Stay with us until the end of this story, because this pilot is about to realize he's made the biggest mistake of his career. Inside the elegant private terminal, Olivia Carter walked in with an effortless confidence. She didn't need to announce her status, she knew her worth. Her tailored, cream-colored suit fit her strong frame perfectly, and the steady click of her heels echoed across the polished marble floor. She approached the check-in counter, where a young woman named Emily stood ready to assist. The employee greeted her with a polite smile, but Olivia noticed the flicker of hesitation in her eyes, the way she quickly glanced at her before speaking. "Good morning, ma'am. How may I assist you?" Emily's voice was professional but cautious. Olivia nodded and placed her sleek handbag on the counter. "I'm here for the Geneva flight. This jet belongs to me." Emily's eyes dropped to her screen, typing quickly. It only took seconds to verify the information. "Yes, of course, Miss Carter. Everything is set. Your captain will be here shortly." Olivia gave a small nod and stepped back, surveying the lounge. Everything around her was designed for exclusivity. Plush leather seating, neatly arranged coffee tables offering espresso and chilled champagne, floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the glistening jets on the tarmac. This flight wasn't just about traveling, it was a milestone. A crucial step in expanding her fashion empire into the European market. Years of relentless work had led her here. But just as everything seemed to be going smoothly, a voice from the hallway caught her attention. "Miss Carter, is that right?" She turned toward the voice and saw Captain Jack Peterson, her assigned pilot. A tall, broad-shouldered man in his early 50s, his uniform crisp, his demeanor sharp, but something in his eyes made Olivia wary. A flicker of doubt, a trace of condescension. She extended her hand in greeting, a simple gesture of professionalism. Jack barely shook it, his grip fleeting before he pulled away. "So, you're the owner of this jet?" he asked, one eyebrow raised, as if he couldn't quite believe it. Olivia's expression didn't change, but inside, she already knew where this was going. She had seen that look before, heard that tone countless times, the silent disbelief, the quiet challenge. "That's right," she said smoothly. "I own this aircraft. Are we ready for departure?" Jack hesitated, shifting his stance before casting a glance toward Emily as if seeking confirmation. When Emily subtly nodded, he let out a small shrug, his lips curling into a smirk that wasn't quite friendly. "Oh, of course. But, we don't usually see." He trailed off, pausing for just a second before finishing. "Owners like you." A thick silence blanketed the room. Emily, still standing behind the counter, looked visibly uneasy. Olivia remained composed, but for anyone paying attention, there was now a cold edge behind her steady gaze. She tilted her head slightly, her voice measured but laced with quiet steel. "Owners like me?" Jack lifted a shoulder, feigning nonchalance. "I just mean, most of our private jet owners come from a certain background. They tend to be a certain kind of people." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Olivia knew exactly what he meant. She took a slow, deliberate breath. But this time the warmth in her eyes was gone. "So, Captain, are you saying I don't belong here?" Jack let out a small, dismissive chuckle, but didn't answer directly. "I'm just saying, this isn't something we see often." Silence stretched between them. Olivia could feel the weight of unspoken words hanging in the air. She could react. She could raise her voice, demand respect. But Olivia Carter wasn't the type to lose her composure so easily. Instead, she adjusted the sleeve of her blazer, met Jack's gaze, and delivered her words with quiet precision. "Then take a good look at my face, Captain, because today I'll be the one deciding whether you keep your job or not." For the first time, Jack's smirk faltered. His usual air of self-assurance wavered just slightly. Olivia had dealt with men like him before, men who believed their assumptions shaped reality. But she knew how to remind them that their biases held no power over her fate. Emily, still silent behind the counter, shifted uncomfortably. Yet Olivia noticed something change in her expression. A newfound realization. In that moment, Emily understood that Olivia wasn't just another wealthy traveler. She was something more. Olivia turned her gaze to the window, where her jet gleamed under the morning sun. It wasn't just a plane. It was a symbol of years of dedication, relentless work, and undeniable success. And no one, especially not Jack Peterson, had the right to question whether she deserved it. She looked back at Jack and gave him a measured smile. "I hope you're ready, Captain, because this flight will be a lesson you'll never forget." Jack stood there, silent for a beat, unable to find a quick retort. Olivia knew this was just the beginning. Jack cleared his throat, his eyes flicking over Olivia as if searching for something that would make sense to him, something that fit his perception of the world. Before he could say another word, Emily, sensing the growing tension, quickly spoke up. "Miss Carter, your VIP lounge is ready. If you'd like, I can escort you there while you wait for boarding." Olivia turned to her, giving a small nod. "Thank you, Emily. I'll wait there for now." Without sparing Jack another glance, she walked away, not because she was avoiding the fight, but because he wasn't worth her time. Yet, as she moved through the terminal, she could feel his eyes still on her. A mix of resentment, frustration, and something else, something that felt a lot like humiliation. She entered the VIP lounge, a space designed for those who belonged in the world of wealth and success. Soft leather seats, warm ambient lighting, crystal glasses waiting to be filled with champagne. But even in a space like this, people like Jack Peterson still questioned whether she belonged. Olivia sat down, pulled out her tablet, and began reviewing her presentation for the Geneva meeting. She had bigger things to focus on than the insecurities of a man unwilling to evolve. Minutes passed before a familiar voice cut through the calm atmosphere. "Excuse me, Miss Carter, but I need to verify some details before we take off." Olivia didn't even need to look up. She already knew who it was. Taking a slow breath, she set her tablet down and lifted her gaze. Jack Peterson stood in the doorway, clutching a folder, his posture rigid. "Oh," Olivia leaned back, crossing her legs. "And is this part of the standard safety procedure? Or is it because I'm not the kind of jet owner you expected?" Jack narrowed his eyes slightly. "I'm just following protocol, Miss Carter. We always conduct thorough checks before takeoff." Olivia tilted her head slightly, studying him. "And does that protocol include doubting the jet's owner, Captain?" Jack cleared his throat, forcing a composed look. "This isn't personal. I just find it unusual that a client like you is traveling alone. Most private jet owners have an entourage, bodyguards, assistants." Olivia let out a quiet laugh, not amused but not surprised. "So you think I can't travel alone?" Her voice was soft, yet each word carried weight. Jack gave a casual shrug. "It's just uncommon." Olivia studied him for a few seconds before standing up. She took a deliberate step toward him. Not aggressive, not hostile, just close enough that Jack instinctively took a small step back. "Listen carefully, Captain Peterson." Her voice was calm, measured, but carried an unmistakable authority. "Uncommon or not, that's not your concern. Your job is to fly the plane, not to decide who deserves to be on it. If that's a problem for you, I can call someone to replace you right now." Jack opened his mouth to argue, but no words came out. He knew she could do it. She had the power, and he had just realized it. After a tense moment, he exhaled and lowered his shoulders slightly. "That won't be necessary," he said, voice notably subdued. "I'll have everything ready for takeoff." Olivia didn't gloat, didn't rub it in. She simply nodded. "Good. I expect a smooth flight." Jack turned and walked away, his steps a little stiffer than before. Olivia sat back down, took a deep breath, and picked up her tablet once more. Jack Peterson may have tried to challenge her, but he just learned that she wasn't someone he could ever keep grounded. Olivia nodded. "Good. I expect to leave on time." Jack stood still for a moment before finally turning on his heel and walking away. But Olivia didn't miss the way his fist clenched at his side. He wasn't done. Not yet. As soon as he disappeared from view, Olivia sat back down and picked up her phone. She pressed a number she knew by heart, and within seconds the call connected. "David?" She greeted him briefly. "Olivia. What's wrong?" The deep, steady voice of David Miller, her close friend and business advisor, came through the line. "There's a slight issue with my pilot." Olivia's tone remained calm, but there was a trace of exhaustion in her voice. "Let me guess, another small issue like before?" David understood immediately. He'd seen this happen to Olivia far too many times. People questioning her, doubting her, despite everything she had accomplished. Exactly. Olivia took a slow sip of water. "It's nothing serious yet, but I need you on standby in case this escalates." David sighed. "Do you want me to contact the airline now?" "Not yet." Olivia's eyes remained fixed on the direction Jack had gone. "But don't go anywhere. If this gets out of hand, I'll make the call." David's voice was firm. "You know I've got you." Olivia allowed a small smile. "I know." She ended the call and leaned back in her seat. But even as she tried to relax, her mind kept racing. She knew exactly who Jack Peterson was. Men like him couldn't accept that someone like her sat in a position of power. But if he kept pushing, she would make sure he learned a lesson he would never forget. Olivia set her phone down on the table, her gaze still locked on the door Jack had walked through. She had seen this play out before. The skeptical looks, the carefully worded comments. The insistence that this was all just standard procedure. But she wasn't here to argue. She was here to fly. And no one, not even her own pilot, had the right to question that. Taking a slow breath, she reached for the glass of water on the table, taking a measured sip. Just as she placed it down, Emily, the check-in agent from earlier, walked into the lounge, looking visibly uneasy. "Miss Carter?" Emily hesitated. Olivia looked up, her expression unreadable. "Is something wrong?" Emily hesitated for a moment, clearly debating whether to speak or not. Then, finally, she exhaled and found her courage. "I just wanted to apologize for what happened." Her voice was quiet but sincere. Olivia studied her for a moment before responding. "And why are you apologizing?" Emily bit her lip, gripping the iPad in her hands a little tighter. "Because I've seen things like this before, and I never knew what to do." Olivia nodded slowly, recognizing the honesty in the young woman's words. "Let me tell you something, Emily." Olivia spoke carefully. "No one expects you to take on the world all at once, but the fact that you see what's happening, that's already a start." Emily seemed to relax slightly. "I just wanted you to know that not everyone here thinks like him." Olivia offered her a small but genuine smile. "I know, and I appreciate that." Emily gave a nod before quietly exiting the lounge, leaving Olivia alone with her thoughts. Meanwhile, Jack Peterson stormed into a small back office near the crew area, shutting the door behind him. A younger pilot, Ryan, stood at a nearby desk reviewing the flight manifest. Jack tossed a folder onto the table, crossing his arms. "I can't believe this," he muttered under his breath. Ryan glanced up. "Believe what?" Jack let out a scoff. "The owner of that jet. A black woman, traveling alone, no security, no assistance. Does that seem normal to you?" Ryan paused for a second before replying. "I don't see why it wouldn't be. If she owns the plane and her paperwork checks out, what's the issue?" Jack shook his head in disbelief. "You're still young, Ryan. You'll learn that things aren't always that simple." Ryan studied him for a long moment before sighing. "No, Jack. I think it is that simple. I see a successful woman boarding her own jet and a pilot who's trying to find a reason to stop her." Jack clenched his jaw but said nothing, because deep down he knew Ryan wasn't wrong. Back in the VIP lounge, Olivia checked her watch. She wasn't waiting any longer. She picked up her phone and dialed David once more. "What's the update?" David asked the moment he answered. "I've been patient long enough." Olivia's voice was calm but sharp. "I need you to email the CEO of Elite Aviation right now. Lay out the situation. Make it clear that my pilot is deliberately delaying my flight without valid cause." David didn't hesitate. "Are you sure? Do you want to speak with him one more time?" Olivia let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "David, I didn't come here to ask for permission to fly my own jet. If he thinks he can make this difficult for me, he's about to realize how wrong he is." David exhaled. "All right, leave it to me." Olivia ended the call, her gaze drifting toward the tarmac where her jet gleamed under the sun. A thought passed through her mind. This isn't the first time, but if there's anything I can do to make sure it's the last, I will. She set her phone down, watching the runway. Her jet was ready, but someone was trying to slow things down. Someone who thought the power wasn't in her hands. He was wrong. Inside the airport's operations office, Jack Peterson leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. The flight schedule glowed on the screen in front of him. Across the desk, Ryan, the younger pilot, was double-checking passenger manifests and reviewing flight documents. "So, what's your next move?" Ryan asked, eyes still on his screen. Jack smirked, "Just making sure everything is by the book. Can't have any mistakes, can we?" Ryan finally looked up. "How long are you planning to stall her?" Jack lifted his chin. "I'm not stalling anyone. I'm just following proper procedures." Ryan let out a slow breath. "You know, Jack, there's a difference between following protocol and creating obstacles. And right now, you're walking a fine line." Jack chuckled, but his eyes flickered with irritation. "You think you know how the world works, but you've still got a lot to learn, kid." Ryan shrugged. "Maybe, but I do know one thing. If she decides she's not letting this go, you're the one who's going to regret it." Jack didn't respond, but his expression hardened. In the VIP lounge, Olivia picked up her phone again and called David Miller. She knew that now was the time for an official move. "Did you send it?" she asked as soon as David answered. "Sent." His voice was steady. "I laid out all the details and sent it directly to the CEO of Elite Aviation. I also CC'd their head of operations." Olivia nodded, feeling a small wave of satisfaction. "Good. Let me know if you get a response." David hesitated. "Are you sure this is how you want to handle it? You could try talking to him again." Olivia let out a slow, knowing smile. "David, I don't negotiate with discrimination, and I certainly don't let anyone question what I own." David sighed. "You know I've got your back. If you need anything, just say the word." "I know," Olivia said. "Thank you." She ended the call and looked back toward the runway. She had made her move. Now she just had to wait and see what happened next. At another corner of the airport, Jack Peterson's phone buzzed. He looked down at the screen and saw an email notification from Elite Aviation's corporate office. The subject line made his stomach tighten. "Urgent, VIP client complaint." Jack clenched his jaw as he opened the email and started reading. Inside the airport's operations office, Jack sat frozen in his chair. His eyes scanned the email, but he barely processed the words. The sender was Michael Donovan, CEO of Elite Aviation. Subject: urgent, VIP client complaint. From Michael Donovan, CEO of Elite Aviation, message: "We have received a formal complaint regarding unprofessional conduct involving one of our VIP clients, Miss Olivia Carter. This is a serious matter, and we require an immediate response from you explaining why her flight has been delayed without justification. We expect a reasonable explanation for this issue." Jack's grip tightened around his phone. He knew at that moment, everything had just changed. Jack clenched his phone, his jaw tightening. A part of him wanted to immediately defend himself, to insist that he was just following protocol. But another part, the stubborn, indignant part, refused to accept that Olivia Carter, a woman he had deemed out of place in his world, had enough power to make him answer to his superiors. He took a deep breath, trying to regain his composure, then turned to Ryan, who had been quietly observing him from across the desk. "Ryan, I'm going to check on the jet. You can keep monitoring the passenger list." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "Really? And what exactly are you checking for?" Jack crossed his arms, a glint of something calculating in his eyes. "Just making sure everything is up to protocol." Ryan held his gaze for a long moment before shaking his head slightly. "You do realize this could backfire, right?" Jack smirked. "I'm just doing what needs to be done." And with that, he stood up and strode out of the office. In the VIP lounge, Olivia checked her watch. She wasn't impatient by nature, but this delay had long passed the point of necessity. Just as she reached for her phone to call David again, the lounge door swung open and Emily hurried inside, looking visibly anxious. "Miss Carter." Emily hesitated, as if unsure whether she should speak. Olivia immediately picked up on the tension in her expression. She set her phone down and gestured for Emily to continue. "Go ahead, Emily. What is it?" Emily swallowed hard. "Captain Peterson, he's inspecting your jet." Olivia's eyes darkened. "Inspecting?" "He said he needs to perform additional safety checks before clearing the flight for departure." Emily's voice was quiet, as if she herself didn't believe the excuse. Olivia studied her for a moment, then stood up without hesitation. "Take me to him." Emily nodded and led the way, the sound of Olivia's heels striking against the marble floor with a deliberate, unwavering rhythm. On the tarmac, Jack Peterson stood near Olivia's jet, speaking with an aircraft technician. "I just want to make sure everything is in perfect condition," Jack said, his voice carrying a practiced seriousness. "I thought I heard something unusual when checking the engine." The technician frowned. "There's no report of any technical issues." Jack shrugged. "Which is exactly why I want to double-check. We wouldn't want any risks in the air, would we?" The technician hesitated but eventually nodded, beginning a surface-level inspection of the aircraft systems. Just then, Olivia arrived. "Captain Peterson," she called out, her voice firm and unwavering. "I think we've already had enough to discuss." Jack turned around slowly, meeting her gaze. "Miss Carter, I'm just doing my job. I heard an unusual sound coming from the engine, and you're deliberately stalling my flight, aren't you?" Olivia cut him off, her eyes sharp as a blade. Jack let out a short, dismissive laugh. "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm simply ensuring safety." Olivia stepped forward, lowering her voice, but making sure every word landed with weight. "Then let me be crystal clear. I've flown on this jet more times than I can count. I know exactly how it operates, and I know exactly when someone is trying to create unnecessary roadblocks. Right now, Captain, you are the only issue standing in my way." Jack remained silent. Olivia turned to the aircraft technician. "Is there any issue with the engine?" she asked plainly. The technician, clearly uncomfortable with the situation, hesitated for a moment before shaking his head. "No, ma'am. Everything is functioning as expected." Olivia nodded, then slowly turned back to Jack. "Then that settles it. You have no reason to delay me any further." Jack pressed his lips together, his frustration barely concealed. He knew he had lost. His superiors were already aware of the situation. If he pushed any further, the consequences would be far worse than simply swallowing his pride. Olivia held his gaze, her voice calm but unwavering. "I'm giving you one last chance, Captain. You can either do your job like a professional, or I'll have you replaced before this flight even begins." A long silence settled over them. Around them, airport staff had begun to take notice, exchanging subtle glances as they waited to see what would happen next. For the first time, Jack Peterson had nowhere left to run. After a long pause, Jack shrugged, trying to mask the frustration in his voice. "Fine," he muttered. "I'll head to the cockpit and prepare for takeoff." Olivia didn't smile, she didn't gloat. She simply nodded. "Good. I'll be on board in 5 minutes." Jack turned sharply, striding toward the cockpit, his shoulders visibly stiff with restrained anger. Olivia stood still for a moment, watching him go. Then she took a deep breath. She had won this battle, but she knew Jack Peterson wasn't done yet. Inside the jet, the air was still, yet tension clung to the cabin like an unseen force. Olivia ascended the metal steps, her heels clicking against the surface with a steady, deliberate rhythm. Inside, the sleek interior of her private jet glowed under the soft, ambient lighting. Premium leather seats, a neatly stocked minibar with top-tier champagne, every detail a reflection of the success she had built through relentless dedication. But tonight, Olivia wasn't in the mood to enjoy luxury. She set her handbag down, adjusted her blazer, and headed straight for the cockpit. The door was slightly ajar. Jack Peterson sat at the controls, his eyes locked on the dashboard as if focusing intently on the flight systems. But Olivia knew better. He was avoiding looking at her. She leaned casually against the doorframe, crossing her arms. Her voice was calm but unyielding. "So, Captain Peterson, are we ready?" Jack turned, his steely blue-gray eyes flashing with irritation. "Like I said, I was just making sure everything is safe." Olivia let out a quiet chuckle, but there was no humor in it. "Is that so? Because if that's true, you must be the most thorough pilot I've ever met. Or," she tilted her head slightly, "you're trying to control something that doesn't belong to you." Jack exhaled sharply, gripping the edge of the dashboard. "I don't know what you're implying. Let me spell it out for you, then." Olivia took a step forward, her voice slow and deliberate. "You don't think I belong here. You saw me, and you asked yourself how someone like me could own a jet like this, and instead of just doing your job, you tried to create obstacles." Jack's jaw tightened. You're blowing this out of proportion. Olivia narrowed her eyes. You know what's really out of proportion? Your arrogance. You think you have the right to decide who deserves to sit on this jet? She stepped even closer, lowering her voice, making sure every word hit its mark. You don't have that right, Captain, and if you don't do your job properly, I will replace you immediately. Jack opened his mouth to argue, but Olivia raised a hand, silencing him. I've already sent a report to Elite Aviation. Their CEO is aware of this situation. Now, I'm giving you one final choice. Either you complete this flight with the bare minimum level of professionalism, or I'll make sure you're fired the moment we land. For the first time, Olivia saw a flicker of worry in Jack's eyes. He knew she wasn't bluffing. With nowhere left to go, Jack took a deep breath, turned back to the controls, and spoke through gritted teeth. We'll be taking off in 5 minutes. Olivia nodded. Good. I expect a smooth flight. She turned and walked out, leaving Jack alone with his thoughts. Olivia settled into her seat and fastened her seatbelt. A few moments later, Jack's voice crackled through the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Peterson. We are preparing for takeoff. Please fasten your seatbelts and prepare for a safe flight. Olivia smirked. At last, he was doing his job. But she knew this wasn't over. Not completely. She turned to the window, gazing out at the vast, endless sky. Today, she had won a battle. But the larger fight was far from finished. The jet's engines roared as it sped down the runway, lifting smoothly into the sky. And Olivia, as always, never bowed to anyone. Inside the cockpit, Jack Peterson sat rigid in his seat, forcing himself to focus on the flight. But he couldn't shake the sinking feeling in his gut. Because no matter how much he wanted to deny it, he had lost. Jack tightened his grip on the controls, his jaw clenched. The flight was proceeding as scheduled, but his mind was still clouded by the confrontation with Olivia. He couldn't believe that a passenger, someone like her, had managed to shake his confidence like that. Olivia hadn't just called him out. She had escalated the situation to the highest levels. And if the executives at Elite Aviation took her complaints seriously. Jack's grip on the throttle tightened. No, he couldn't let this get out of hand. He stole a quick glance to his right, where Ryan, the co-pilot, remained focused on the flight systems. Ryan had been quiet ever since takeoff, but Jack knew he was watching him. Finally, after several minutes of silence, Ryan spoke. His voice was steady, but there was an unmistakable weight to his words. You know, Jack? Ryan didn't look up from his screen. You may be a good pilot, but you just made a very big mistake. Jack didn't meet his gaze. I was just doing my job. Ryan let out a short, knowing laugh. No, you weren't. You let your ego get in the way. And now, you might have to pay for it. Jack opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, a notification appeared on the control panel. An incoming communication from Elite Aviation's headquarters. Ryan raised an eyebrow and glanced at Jack. Looks like someone wants a word with you. Jack inhaled deeply, then pressed the button to accept the call. A calm but authoritative voice came through the cockpit speakers. Captain Peterson, this is Michael Donovan, CEO of Elite Aviation. We need to talk immediately. Jack's stomach tightened. This wasn't just a routine check-in. Of course, sir. How can I help? Jack tried to keep his voice steady. I just received a detailed report from Miss Olivia Carter regarding your conduct before this flight, Donovan said, his tone even but firm. This is a serious matter, and I want to hear directly from you. What exactly happened? Ryan shot Jack a quick glance, curiosity flickering in his eyes. Jack cleared his throat, trying to find the right words. I was simply following safety procedures, sir. I had no intention of causing any inconvenience to the passenger. Is that so? Donovan's voice remained cold. Then explain why the ground crew and technicians found no issues with the aircraft, yet you insisted on a secondary inspection? Jack's grip on the yoke tightened. I was just doing my job? No, Captain, you were abusing your authority. This time, Donovan's voice carried an edge of finality. And I can't allow this to go without consequences. Upon landing in Geneva, you to report to our office immediately for a formal review. I suggest you be prepared. Jack felt his chest tighten. This was worse than he had expected. Understood, sir, he responded, his voice lower now. As the call disconnected, Ryan smirked slightly. Well, looks like Geneva is going to be an interesting trip for you. Jack didn't answer. His eyes stayed fixed on the horizon, but his mind was tangled in the consequences of his own actions. In the passenger cabin, Olivia leaned back in her seat, taking a slow sip of water. She hadn't heard the full conversation in the cockpit, but she didn't need to. She knew exactly what was happening. And she knew this was only the beginning. She glanced down at her phone as a new message came in. David, Elite Aviation has taken action. Jack Peterson will have to answer for this when you land. You handled it well. A small, satisfied smile touched Olivia's lips. She typed back, Olivia, justice must be served. She set her phone down and turned her gaze toward the window. The sky stretched endlessly before her, wide, open, limitless. Today she hadn't just defended herself. She had set a precedent for change. Jack Peterson may have believed that holding the controls meant holding power, but Olivia knew better. True power doesn't belong to those who grip the wheel. It belongs to those who refuse to accept injustice, and she would always be one of those people. The plane descended smoothly, the soft chime of the overhead announcement signaling their imminent landing. Olivia glanced at her watch. Right on schedule. No more delays. She had won this battle. But there was still one final chapter left to unfold. Outside the window, Geneva stretched beneath her, an elegant blend of historic architecture and sleek financial hubs. The waters of Lake Limon shimmered in the afternoon sun, serene and untouched by the storm Jack Peterson was about to face. Olivia slowly gathered her belongings, adjusting the cuff of her blazer. She knew someone on this flight was far more nervous than she was. In the cockpit, Jack Peterson sat frozen in his seat. He could feel Ryan watching him, but he didn't dare return the glance. Everything was falling apart. Donovan's voice still echoed in his head. Jack had convinced himself that he was in control, that he could maneuver around the situation by hiding behind safety procedures. But now, there was no maneuvering left to do. He stared at the control panel, but his mind was anywhere but the flight. All he could think about was what awaited him when they landed. Ryan, arms casually resting on the seat beside him, gave Jack a side glance before shaking his head slightly. You could have handled this very differently, Jack. His voice carried no mockery, just a plain, irrefutable truth. Jack clenched his jaw but didn't respond. The plane touched down with a smooth, controlled landing. Olivia tightened her seatbelt as she felt the jet's wheels make gentle contact with the runway. A voice crackled through the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Geneva. We have arrived on schedule. The moment the engines powered down, Olivia unbuckled her seatbelt, collected her handbag, and stood. Her gaze flickered toward the cockpit. Now she would see how Jack faced his consequences. The aircraft door opened. Standing at the foot of the stairs was an elite aviation executive. His suit crisp, his expression unreadable as he scanned the list in his hand. His presence alone told Olivia everything she needed to know. With the same measured grace as always, Olivia descended the steps, the faint clicks of her heels echoing in the quiet tension of the tarmac. As she passed the executive, he gave a single nod, a silent confirmation that everything had been handled. But Olivia didn't leave just yet. She lingered beside her waiting car, turning her gaze back toward the aircraft. Jack Peterson was the last to disembark. His steps were slow, almost hesitant. He knew what was coming. The moment his foot touched the ground, the elite aviation executive stepped forward. Captain Peterson, you need to come with us immediately. The man's tone was cool and direct. Jack's mouth opened slightly, as if he was about to argue, but then he closed it. He knew there was nothing left to say. His eyes darted around the tarmac, as if searching for one last ally, one last bit of support. But no one stepped forward. Even Ryan didn't spare him a second glance. Olivia watched the scene unfold with quiet satisfaction. There was no need for gloating, no need for final words. The truth had spoken for itself. She turned and slid into the backseat of her car, the crisp air conditioning cooling her skin. But even as she leaned back, her mind was still on the runway. Her phone buzzed. A message from David. David, Jack Peterson has officially been suspended. The company is considering immediate termination. Looks like you made an impact. Olivia smirked. She typed back, her message simple but firm. Olivia, justice requires consequences. She set her phone down and exhaled, a deep, measured breath. She had done the right thing. At Elite Aviation's Geneva office, Jack Peterson sat stiffly in front of a panel of executives. Across from him, Michael Donovan flipped through a file, his expression unreadable. Finally, the CEO looked up. Captain Peterson, after reviewing Miss Olivia Carter's report and verifying accounts from the ground crew, we have no choice but to suspend you indefinitely. Jack opened his mouth, but Donovan lifted a hand, cutting him off. We do not tolerate discrimination or abuse of power within this company, Donovan continued, his voice final. You have not only lost the trust of one of our most valued clients, but have also damaged your own reputation in the process. Jack clenched his fists under the table, but he knew there was no coming back from this. Do you have anything to say? Jack took a deep breath, but then shook his head. He had lost everything. And he knew. It all started the moment he underestimated a woman like Olivia Carter. Night had fallen over Geneva. From her hotel window, Olivia looked down at the city streets, now illuminated by golden lights. She took a sip of hot tea, feeling its warmth spread through her fingertips. Today had been a long day. A day of confrontations, a day of skeptical glances, a day filled with words laced with prejudice. But above all, today was a day she did not back down. She hadn't just fought for herself, she had fought for everyone who would walk this path after her. Her phone buzzed. A message from David. David, Elite Aviation has confirmed. Jack Peterson has been terminated immediately. They will also implement diversity and inclusion training for all employees. Olivia read the message, then slowly set her phone down on the table. Jack Peterson had believed he could decide who belonged in that jet, but the world does not operate on his biases. The world operates on justice. And today, justice won. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, allowing the exhaustion to leave her body. She had won this battle. But she knew, this fight wasn't just hers. Tomorrow, someone else would be underestimated. Tomorrow, someone else's worth would be questioned. And tomorrow, someone else would stand up, just as she did today. She opened her eyes, gazing at the vast night sky beyond the glass. No one had the right to dictate her dreams. No one had the right to tell her she didn't belong. And no one, absolutely no one, could stop her from flying. If this story made you think, if you believe that no one should be judged by their appearance or background, share your thoughts in the comments below. Share this story with your friends, because someone out there might need to hear it right now. And if you want to keep hearing stories about justice, resilience, and people who refuse to be underestimated, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Never let anyone decide your worth. You belong anywhere you've worked hard to be. Thank you for watching. See you in the next story.